Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar. The topic of today's webinar is virtual workforce personalization. During this event, we will explore how enterprise search empowers employees and customers by achieving a unified single source of information. Also, we will highlight the use cases where chatbots and smart question answering systems can be deployed with the greatest effect. Before we continue, I want to mention that we will open the floor for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. But during the presentation, you can use the Q&A chat feature to post any questions you have, and we will address them at the end. It is clear that we are living in a time of change, and recently, many businesses have had their operational routines impacted by external forces. Therefore, a key question that companies need to ask is, how will they distribute information to a virtual workforce? And how can we cater to customers seeking information online? Today, we will approach these questions and provide solutions on how to scale information dissemination for the virtual digital workspace. To help us with these topics, I would like to introduce you to today's speakers. Our first speaker is Mr. Simon Taylor. He is the Vice President of Worldwide Channels and Alliances at LucidWorks. And our second speaker is Mr. Ronnie Timmermans, CEO and Managing Director at Xenit Solutions. I will now hand over the presentation to Simon.
Thanks very much, Klaus. I appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today. So we have a fun-packed webinar for you today. But first of all, I think it's important that we just spend a bit of time thinking about how organizations have been impacted in recent months, because it really does start to set the scene for the type of problem space that we see ourselves in today with information dissemination for the workforce, and also how we can sort of start to understand how we position solutions and approaches to go solve that. So first of all, I mean, there's a bit of a squiggle I'm showing you on the screen here. It's really the sort of the curve and cycle that people have been through over the last few months, thinking about how they transform the solutions that they have in their organizations to support people working from home. Of course, back at the beginning of the year, most digital transformation projects were in a sort of steady state of prioritization. And for those that aren't aware globally, and I get to see that in my role fairly consistently at LucidWorks, we see that people are transforming a lot of what they're doing digitally, both internally and externally. But it's not necessarily the highest priority in the organization. It's one that's obviously in the top 10. But that's obviously changed considerably in recent months. So whilst at the beginning of the year, we were seeing very steady transformational sort of model in terms of moving applications more digitally aware, moving solutions for intranet and information dissemination to both the building-based workforce and also the remote workforce consistently. What's happened, of course, when COVID-19 came along is that we all started working from home, and for many of us, that's continuing. So that meant that all of a sudden, applications that were really centered on being used in offices and being used inside a firewall could become extremely challenging for people now working either outside the firewall or on VPN. So as a result, it meant that organizations had to accelerate a lot of their transformational projects in this area to support that. And I think there's a very good statistic in Europe, particularly from Forrester back in March, that talked about over 60% of organizations being in a really bad way, a bad situation in terms of being able to support a virtual workforce across Europe. Of course, what happened is at that time when people started working from home, we noticed that organizations were starting to face really severe disruption, and that was caused by not only consumers not being able to do or interact with them in the same way, but also employees not necessarily being able to be as productive. And as a result, we saw a very sharp decline in employee productivity. Going from a meeting-oriented, building-based culture to virtually getting on Zooms and go to meetings and things like that, it's been quite challenging for a lot of organizations, and establishing policy and process around that. But what's interesting is that we're now seeing a renewed increased spending on information collaboration tools in the marketplace. And as a result, obviously people are looking at solutions that better support their workforce and their consumers in a variety of different ways. because let's face it, we're looking at a situation where this may continue for some time. So this is really the new norm in terms of how we're supporting information across our organization in a much more holistic way. So I wanted to share this with you because this really just sort of highlights really where we are today. Now, as a result of this, obviously, in transforming to the new norm, we need to think a little bit differently. And I wanted to share some stats with you here as well before we get into the meat of the conversation today. First of all, first 2 points from really 451 group. It talks about how organizations think that this is nothing that is just short term. It's going to be permanent. But at the same time, people are very anxious to go back to physical location. So if you're doing the right thing by your employees today, you don't force them to go back into a building. As a result, that means that we have to transform the way that we look at information dissemination globally in our organizations. So that's the key thing. And then secondly, from Ernst & Young and the Government Business Council talks about things like how employees need to wear masks when they go to workplaces, which is obviously something that a lot of people don't want to do. And also at the same time, how coordination, particularly in public sector, is a big issue. So, the idea of digital transformation and building solutions that do information dissemination is a great theory, but in reality, it requires a fair amount of coordination unless you have the right tools. So that is part of the talk track today. So let's just talk about how we move people's thinking. And the assumption here is that, yes, we need to look at the way we support information access, information productivity for our employees. And if we start from the position that, yeah, we're sure it's challenging, it doesn't necessarily need to be something that we need to be scared of or we need to figure out whole processes around. There are tool sets and capabilities in the marketplace today that will accelerate how we can disseminate information to your employees. So first of all, let's talk about top priorities. So right now, I see 3 top priorities for most organizations when they think about how we can better give employees information that they need to be successful in their roles. The first one is to create a unified single source of information. Biggest challenges today are multiple applications, multiple different types of interactions, a lot of customer and particularly employee frustration on how they gain access to information. And candidly, it's the greatest source of frustration for most employees. There was a good stat from Gallup a couple of years ago that talked about over 80% of employees are dissatisfied by the way they access information, and it's the primary reason why they end up changing roles or changing companies. Second big priority is enabling quick and easy access. People don't want to spend hours of time trying to find something. And this is also about customer support centers as well. For customers externally trying to come into support centers, they don't want to wait on the line for 45 minutes now to try and get an answer to a question. There's much better ways to do that, whether it's virtual assistants or effective search technologies, things like that, to get the right answers to people quickly and easily. So it's an internal and external focus. And then the third area is business decision making, which is about getting better insights to how people need to make decisions by really highlighting areas of information value that really are previously hidden because either you didn't know where the information resided or you didn't know how different sources of information could combine together to provide a better insight. So there's an opportunity there for a richer and more established way that line of business functions can operate. Of course, the challenges that really before, when I say before, several years ago, it was easy to do this type of thing. We had very predictable, definable process, data was in one place, simple ways of accessing information. Today, we live in a very different connected world. We now have workforce at home. We have multiple applications that need to come together to deliver the right type of insight. We have multiple different collaboration and communication tools. We have people internally and externally utilizing different types of tool sets to access the same information. So right now we have to really combine a whole multitude of things to create this unified model to give people the right insight. So let's just talk about previous models around this and the way people approach things. So when typically we're dealing with organizations with maybe multiple domains of data, so structured data sets and some unstructured data sets, they tend to employ a very typical big data approach. And this leads to very lengthy projects. And the typical cycle for any big data project today is somewhere between 9 and 12 months to transform the way people look at data sets. The challenge with that is we don't live in a time frame right now where we have 9 to 12 months or 24 or 40 months to do these types of things. So what we talk about today is really what we call the last mile problem, which is today any projects that we embark on from a transformation perspective tend to involve these first sort of 6 steps particularly, which is all about data movement, data quality, data transformation, data flattening, cubing, aggregation, data lake construction, and then maybe pivoting and using more of an insight technology or a graph technology to create models of access before we even get to anything that can be a true value to the end user. And this is a problem from the point of view that today we have to fix almost instantly how people view information. That is the primary goal of digital transformation solutions in information dissemination. And unless we can address that in a time frame that's reasonable, then we don't get to see the value. We waste a lot of time. So what we've developed as a strategy here is a way of getting very quickly data into an environment where we can create insight. And that fundamentally is an inverted index. It's a search technology. And what we're doing there is we're linking two primary real-time sources of data, whether it's unstructured, semi-structured, structured data sets, multitude of different applications, and putting that into an environment where we can pivot around that data, we can search it, we can extract entity, we can associate data sets from a multitude of different applications together consistently, holistically, and then visualize that rapidly so people can find information quickly and get answers to their questions via a multitude of different types of approaches. And that really allows us to reduce time to value. And just to give you an example here, typically we're talking about a 90% reduction in the amount of time it takes to do these types of shorter insight type projects versus the typical big data approaches that we would have typically engaged around. So given that, then what do we focus on to create those types of solution, those transformative type of insight solutions? Well, there's really 4 domains that are really important today to achieve success when it comes down to unifying access. We have to think about the people solutions that are in place, how are people collaborating, where is information being moved, managed, and accessed. Secondly, there's a knowledge bases where really the core data assets are there, and that includes things like SharePoint, Alfresco, and I know Ron is going to talk a little bit about Alfresco later on as well. Then there's the process type applications that really are moving and managing data for the organization and how we can relate repositories and collaboration in the context of those processes, and things like SAP, Salesforce, Workday are really good solutions there. And then there's fundamentally the tool sets that people are using, but physically in an organization, but now remotely to access data and get answers to questions. And that can be everything from typical devices like an iPhone or an Android device to actually voice application solutions like Google Assistant or Siri, or things where people are asking questions and wanting responses. We need adaptive solutions. And what we've done at LucidWorks is really develop a strategy around this where the core of our technology is called Fusion, which is in the middle, but we connect to over 100 different types of environments to pull this information together into an insight technology where we can pivot around that data set very rapidly. And by rapidly, I mean, we're just talking weeks or a few months to get to solutions that would normally take a year, 18 months plus to really typically build normally. And that's really important today, because given the hyper cycle that we're in about really planning for effective remote workforce productivity, we need these types of solutions to be effective. Now, in that whole framework, what are we really about today? Well, we're about the sort of A to B model. So we're going left to right on this slide here. We're about taking what I just talked about in terms of those 4 domains of different types of solution and application into an indexable model where we can do things like, anomaly detection. We can flatten the way that we look at data. We can do clustering and topical analysis. We can classify data accordingly. We can build advanced queries that pre-anticipate the way people want to look and see information. We can support natural language so people can ask questions in their native language, and we support over 30 different languages so that you can really get meaningful answers back in your mother tongue and in the way that people think about asking questions, or in alternative languages as well. We can use machine learning to offer insights around the relationship of data that we weren't aware of, that really start to promote the value of the information much more readily than having to build huge business intelligence models around aggregation to try and get to those types of insight. We can therefore boost the value of information, more importantly, to the personalized recipients. We're going to talk about personalization in a second here, but really promote true important pieces of information to the particular individuals based on what they do and their role, versus just blanketly distributing large amounts of data to people. And then we can really start to develop a learning model. We call those signals, which is an AI-based methodology, where we start to really remember how people use things and start to then predict and adapt how people use solutions. And then the final piece is that we can build a visualization, or we can integrate it into an environment so we can rapidly deliver the type of UI and the UX that people are expecting in these solutions. There is one other aspect as well, which is about enrichment. So when you start to think about how people organize information internally, they often have an ontology or a taxonomy, and that's where all of our partners come in very, very extensively, including in Xenit here, that have huge knowledge in what it means to really create organizational models around how they unify and look at information from an ontology and taxonomy perspective. So that is really important to us as well in this context. Now let's pivot a little bit and talk about personalization. So what truly makes information dissemination solutions more effective is to really understand the individual. And a good example is of how we need to transform and look at this. It's just to, again, reflect on what's been happening in the last few months. When people started working from home, the immediate reaction of most organizations was just to open up all systems, which caused a massive distribution of data to these individuals, me included actually to some degree. Now what that led to is a lot of confusion, and also in a remote sense, because of the way people were actually working, a really significant drop in productivity. Now I mentioned a figure earlier on, which is like 62% drop in productivity as a result of COVID-19. That I can't attribute all of that to the distribution of data, but distribution of large amounts of data was a significant factor, because it really created a deluge of information that people couldn't really navigate through effectively. So what we then need to do is then bring these different sine curves into a more normalized range, and that we do that through personalization, which is really understanding the needs of the individual and their role, and really how we surface information to support them in that capacity so that they have more relevancy in what they do today. And again, insight technology helps significantly there. So when we think about personalization, really machine learning plays a huge part in that, because it's the machine learning that starts to understand who the individual is, what their needs and wants are, how we take all of the range of information sources and orientate them to that individual. We can dynamically then adapt that based on how they rate and review the information that has been surfaced to them. And then we can create predictable models with AI that really start to offer intent and insight as to the future things that somebody might need, so we can create the right type of information resources to them. This might sound a bit sort of high level in terms of implementation, but this can be defined very specifically down to very particular groups of users. And the way that we do that is we think about 4 core groups of knowledge. We think about how we ingest and prepare data for personalization. What is it that we need to think about? That's where ontology and taxonomy helps, but it also is about the organizational structure and the roles that people have. It's also how we scale. How do we support large-scale environments? And to give you a context here, we do a lot of work around core content management type repositories, whether it's Alfresco or SharePoint. And in fact, Microsoft's largest SharePoint customer globally that has over 300 million documents in their repository, they're using Lucidworks Fusion to search because we can offer more personalized insights. And happy to share some stories around that if anybody has some interest. But then the key pivot point is around intent prediction. This is really understanding how we get from a search to relevancy. And to do that, we need to really start to use machine learning to understand the individual, the data sets, offer insight relevant to that, start to predict and understand what type of assets people need. And then the last piece, as I mentioned previously, is Where do we visualize this? Do we integrate it into an existing intranet? Do we provide a portal? Do we use a particular technology like a virtual assistant? And we also have one of those in Fusion as well. So that if somebody needs to adapt their environments very quickly to include a virtual assistant, we can do that without disrupting intranet sites, core applications, because it can run in parallel and direct people to the right resources they need to answer their questions. It's a very popular thing right now to include virtual assistants. And of course, beneath a lot of these areas is a lot of clever technology that we use. But first, before we get into that, let's talk about some of the most scalable aspects. So to deliver any solution this type of scale today, you need something that can manage vast amounts of data. So it needs to be extensible, scalable, in the millions of documents range. We need to support internal and external sources. We need to be able to deliver it on premise, in a cloud, managed or platform hosted. We need to have a range of security at an individual level. We protect data for GDPR at the individual asset and personalized level. So we're not exposing data in any way that an individual shouldn't have access to, both internally and externally and outside of the EU as well. But in terms of the core functionality areas, some of the key highlights I wanted to mention here is the fact that we support natural language. We can do clustering and topic dissection at the outset. We also flatten data so that we can really understand how we run queries against it effectively. That's one of the secret sources of using an insight engine technology, is that we relate data in the same technology, multi-domain, so that effectively you're running SQL queries if you were thinking about it from an engineering point of view. Then the automatic relevancy and some of what we call A to B testing in the intent prediction. A to B testing for us is being able to say, look, if you were running a simple search, what would the results be, versus something that was machine learning driven, so you could instantly see side by side the improvement in relevancy for that individual as you start to really orientate the right type of curation for that person. And then there's the embedded nature of what we do, which is to create rapid environments to prototype. I mean, for example, today, when we're delivering virtual assistants using something we call Fusion Smart Answers, right? We're typically building prototypes for customers in 3 or 4 days based on data sets that we can already gain access to from external sources for that organization. And it's incredible to see people react to having something that immediately we can run in parallel, typically from a cloud, that really directs people to the information resources much more effectively in their organization. So this is really what the technology at work is. Now, what's really important in this, as we start to move into the Xenit conversation today, is about data quality. So you heard me talk about ontology and taxonomy as being a primary focus of our partners at Lucidworks, but also their ability to define and validate the quality of the data, because they understand the verticals and solution spaces that you're in. They also understand how to drive that process with you specifically. And to tie this all together, let's think about how all this sort of constructs. So today, if you were approaching delivering an information dissemination solution for a COVID-19 virtual workforce, what would you do? Well, we take your information model today and all the applications, and then we understand how we connect that together to give you an environment that you can search. And to do that, we index it, we create intent models, we use out-of-the-box machine learning, we can use some out-of-the-box application templates, and of course you can build things. Then you can plug and play the really important things that you need to offer personalization. They might be a natural language model, it might be something that we want to implement for AI. And then what delivers rapid, if you like, prototyping, is to start to use some of the templates that we have. But this is where the true partner expertise comes in. And you'll see from Ronnie's conversation in a second that they're really good at connecting things like Alfresco or particular repositories of data to these front-end experiences in very rapid amounts of time, so that we can really truly virtualize these information resources for your workforce. And a great way of illustrating this, if you go back to the example I gave you earlier on of that connected architecture in this sort of insight model, is to think about all the sources of applications that we want to touch and how we get to them. So really what Lucidworks is doing is providing this core search and insight engine technology that we can be leveraged as a platform, and it truly is a platform with a multitude of connectors. But then what our partners have expertise in is building that into environments and delivering solutions that can truly sort of optimize the experience for your employees. And there's a variety of technologies that sort of do that. Now with that, let me hand over a little bit to Ronnie so he can talk to you a little bit more about how Xenit obviously support the capabilities that we've just been going through.
Okay, great. Thank you, Simon. That was a fast but also a fascinating overview of what Fusion can do as a technology. And indeed, I wanted to talk about what Xenit does and also why we value the partnership as well. Let me move to the next slide. So about Xenit, for those that don't know us yet, we can claim to be the #1 alfresco integrator in Belgium and in the top 5 alfresco integrators in Europe. That makes 12 years of experience in information and document management. And let's say under the hood of alfresco, of course, there is Solar, and we love good open source technology. So we like and love Apache Solar. And with our ECM know-how, we have also built interfaces to search for information. Alfred Desktop is a product that exists for 10 years. Alfred Finder is our new web-based product, and the name Finder suggests that we attach particular value to search capabilities. And there is the front end, that is the user interface, but there is also the back end, and that is Solar, and that is Fusion, because we always had the feeling that we could extract more value out of alfresco and out of Solar by using other technologies. We are managing today, just to give you an idea about size and volume, more than 300 million documents for our customers. About 2/3 of that is being carried and managed for 3 major large insurance companies, premium customers of ours. The largest installation is more than 100 million documents actually in insurance company in Belgium. Again, Solar, Fusion, you haven't talked a lot about that, Simon, but Solar being the foundation for Fusion, you as a company, LucidWorks, have 40% of contributors to Solar and 70% of contributions. You play a very large and important role in developing that technology, and you build Fusion on top of it. So you have a vested interest in building a great Solar technology. But it is a search engine behind and beneath alfresco. It has advanced full text capabilities. And I guess that's where you have to position it compared to an offering like Elasticsearch. It's very much text oriented and text search rich and capable. We can scale it for high volumes for sure. It can be used for near real-time indexing, and that's the progress that Apache Solar has made as well in the last years, and that Fusion, of course, can also build upon, because the near real-time indexing means as soon as the information is available, I'm able to find it and to retrieve it. And last but not least, it's an open source solution which stands behind the principles why we liked and we like alfresco and will build upon it in the future. Is these open source technologies give an innovation space to our customers. They limit the lock-in, and they just increase the value, I think, in our total offerings. And it's very much part of the DNA of Xenit as well, to use these technologies. Now, okay, so what does Xenit want to do? We, of course, have our expertise in alfresco, and we want to keep that and increase that even. But we want to move from, let's say, enterprise content management into intelligent information management. And we think that our customers want to move in that same kind of direction, and we want to continue to be a relevant partner to them. ECM is a service to manage and secure enterprise content, yes, and content is a concept, I think, to look in a maybe in a pre-digital way to look at documents, records, web pages, emails, and multimedia. That content exists, and we have to manage it. And alfresco is a great solution to do that, and Fusion is a great way to index content. But we have to look at all the information in an enterprise to be able to really be relevant to the business of our customers. And that's what I think is intelligent information management is about. You look at structured, unstructured information and everything in between that. And then I would like to speak about, you have been speaking about ontologies and taxonomies, etc. I just use the term metamodel because we have the metadata typically in an ACM environment, and you have the document model, which is also typical for an ECM environment. And I think we have to move one step beyond that. And we have to make a rich model that actually maps the information in a company, in an enterprise, that maps also how documents and content relates to information, but it's just broader and richer. Everybody knows that triangle from data to wisdom. I don't know whether we're already at wisdom, but we've moved from data into information thanks to metadata. And we want to move from information to knowledge thanks to a meta model. It's richer, and it would cover much more use cases in an enterprise as today we do with active archives, let's say. So that meta model, that's the second slide about it. It makes sense of search, because what is the problem of search? There's a lot of information in a company, and employees are there, and you could find back the information that you managed yourself or that you stored in the system, so you know that it is there. But how do you know that other people have added information that might be interesting to you? So what we need, again, and that's why this meta model is there, is we need a shared conceptual information model. It's shared, new people can look at it, other people, existing employees can look at it, your partners could see part of that map because we want to share that information. It's conceptual, you don't look at the information, all of the bits and the bytes and the terabytes that is there. It's conceptual, so it simplifies things, and it's a model. It's abstract in a sense, because with abstract concepts we can build a model that lasts for some time. The reality of the business of our customers is there's a lot of change, and change is accelerating. So we need to create a model that has stable elements, so you can refer to it and you don't have to change it every day. And that is the map to information for our customers. Again, it moves up from data to wisdom. With data, you can find back what you stored yourselves. With information, you can find stuff that you didn't know that is there. And I think with knowledge, we can start to explore information that is there and find the right paths in information. I wouldn't speak too much about wisdom yet. I think that's a step that we want to take in the years beyond today. Or connector. Let's go back from the height of the meta model back to the connector. Very specifically, we created a connector between Alfresco and Fusion. Because we want to experiment and learn how we could enrich and improve querying information with Fusion. How can Fusion enrich Alfresco? Let me give two examples. But we're not looking only at Alfresco, but we know Alfresco very well, so we can do something about that. There is, first of all, machine learning to enrich content. In a classical way of indexing information, you would just take the information, add it to an index, and allow it to be found. That's the dissemination of information. Now, with machine learning, for instance, we can detect personally identifiable information. That is very important, because that allows you to protect that information from a privacy point of view. That is not inherently part of the metadata or of the content of our documents. And that's where other technology like Fusion comes into play to add that kind of intelligence in the whole ingestion pipeline, at the point at which we ingest information in Fusion. Secondly, at the point of consultation of the index, we can use signals to personalize the search experience. Simon has been talking about personalizing the experience. The signals is what has been retrieved, what has been searched on the system, what are people looking for, and what did people find as information. That information is very valuable, and we are not using that information today. So we need to collect that information as to be able to make the results when people search for information extremely relevant. Now, there are simple use cases where, for instance, you're looking on a contract number, on a customer number, on a claim number. That's fine. We don't need signals for that. You need scaling. But in some cases, we need more intelligent information to be retrieved. I'll give an example of that later on. And that's where signals come in. You could also collect signals of your customers. What are your customers looking for? What's their interest? Which gives you incredible insight in their needs. A few words about our connector. It is made by one of our specialists in Solar and Alfresco. It's of course a team effort, but carried forward by one engineer. It allows to index in an incremental manner as opposed to recrawling things. There was a out-of-the-box CMIS connector available. Now our connector allows just to crawl for the differences, what has changed, and that is of course much more efficient than when you always have to recrawl a document or a database. It supports access control lists. So that's one of the challenges, of course. If you want to, or you're going to index many data sources, you want to make sure that people only can access the information they're intended to see and to share. So we also validate that all the access control lists are respected. And thirdly, in terms of performance, we have focused a little bit at the ingestion speed. So how many objects can I index per second? Well, we've done tests of indexing about 130 metadata objects, so the logical objects of documents per second. That I would say justifies an ambition to index a large system of, let's say, 100 million documents in 1 to 2 weeks, which is good. That's a reasonable performance. We've used pretty powerful hardware to do that, so you always have to validate it in the environment where this is going to work. Trying to make it a bit more concrete, let's say, what kind of use cases can we support with that technology? Huh? Once we have indexed the documents and we have indexed the other data sources, because there are 100 connectors here. Alfresco is one of them, but there are many sources of important information. So what kind of use cases would we support? To give one is an on-demand customer intelligence. If I have an interaction with my customer, and that might be in a commercial setting, it might be in a service setting, but you want to have relevant information at that point at your disposal, because it helps you to serve that customer better. For instance, what is the last interaction we had with the customer? Information in your CRM, probably Salesforce or another offering. What product has the customer of ours? What is he using? That's an internal database very often, could be part of your CRM. What's the last version of the contract and the annex that we concluded with that customer? Are we preparing a draft proposal? Is somebody else working on a proposal for the customer? Can I find that? Can I find that information even if I'm not aware that it exists? I think that we're talking about insight. There might be as well external information that is interesting, like the credit rate of your customer. There are other examples of this, but external information mixed with internal information at the point and the moment that you need it empowers you to give better service to the customer. Of course, this again, and there comes the Metamodel again. If you look at the questions on the left-hand side, or the type of information that I want to see, then the Metamodel is just a model of the concepts. It's a customer, contract, a proposal. You need those concepts. In a simple way, they are in metadata in your document management, but we can make them smarter and richer. Anyway, all our larger companies and customers have enterprise architects. They have that kind of model. Now, what we need to add and what we need to make very sharp and relevant are the access rights. there is privacy and confidentiality here implied, and when access rights are already a challenge to manage your documents, if you look at the whole area of your information landscape, you have to be very aware of how access rights are being arranged and how you can respect privacy and confidentiality. So in your model, there needs to be place to model access rights together with the major concepts that you're looking at. I just try to visualize this a little bit. You can see that there is a lot of interaction with information at that contact point with the customer. So it's a lady customer in the center. We get master data of that customer from Salesforce. There has been a conversation with the customer, and you know what? We detected that there was some conversation and interaction with the CFO of the company as well in that same email thread. So Exchange and email servers are an extremely important source of information next to Salesforce and CRMs. Then there might be, in our case, Alfresco. There's a contract, versions of the contract. There's a frame contract that governs that contract. Can I have that information at a glance when I need to interact with the customer? And then there might be the collaborative environment of Office 365, where we're preparing maybe another proposal or a new version of a contract to that customer. And if you have to go and fetch that information one by one, either you do it and it takes you hours, not to say days, or you don't do it and you just base your interactions on incomplete information on the customer. And that would be a pity, because it's possible to have that information and to empower everybody, either at home or in the workplace. I don't think it's so important. You just need the information to be empowered to give the best type of service. I'm looking a little bit forward into the future. Two things I want to highlight that I think that are important and that were also already touched upon by Simon in the first part of the presentation. If you look into the future, I do believe that machine learning is today potential. It's applied in some contexts, but it will be part of our IT landscape in the years to come. As an example, what can they do for us? We spoke about that Metamodel, the most important concepts like the customer, the contract, a claim, whatever you want to talk about. That Metamodel can actually be derived from the content. So if you analyze your content very well, you can just surface the most important concepts and their relationships. So you can discover actually from the information how the model should look. Now, I don't believe that only the machines will make all of this so intelligent. So it needs people. It needs the intelligence of people. But machines can help to discover. People are there to curate. And then you do a discovery again. It's a process. It's a cycle, because our business changes, our information changes. So you have to entertain that cycle. And there is an interaction between machines that could create an initial model. Then there is supervised learning, and we continuously adapt that to the business reality. And I think you have to automate that, and technologies like Fusion that integrate the whole indexing of information with the enrichment of information, with using signals, etc., can help us to do that. It's a top-down and a bottom-up process. People do that. We do that case-based, and at some point you look again at from the top down and try to refine the model. But that's where machine learning and machines will help us to create better models. Secondly, I also see search taking a central place in the IT landscape in the 3 to 5 years from now. It's already the case, and if you look at the cloud, there are tendencies, look at identity and access management, that is becoming a service by itself. So where we saw in the past that every vertical application arranged access and identity management, authorization, search, all of those things. That when you do that, of course, we get kind of a silo problem because every application does it for itself. In a cloud architecture, one would see that these generic services, and I think search is one of them, start to position themselves as being a central service. The consequence of it is, of course, that they can index all of the information, and not just by vertical application, but all of the information in a company that is important to serve the customer, to make better products, to deliver successful projects, whatever you're doing, and probably you're doing all of them at the same time. If you then look at what kind of information that is being indexed, I think, and also from our pedigree from Alfresco and records and document management, Alfresco keeps is a very well a great environment to do transactional content processes. That is to integrate with third-party systems that either create or consume content as part of business processes. And with our large and small and medium and whatever sized customers, that's typically one use. The other use is a system of records, long-term retention of your records, of your documents as well. Then we have transactional systems. I just put one, Salesforce, but then there's SAP, and there's lots of transactional systems that just help your current processes and your live information to proceed and to perform your business. And there's, of course, the collaborative environments, OneDrive, SharePoint, Office 365, Windows shares, even quite a bit, that can also be indexed. So all of that information can be brought together under the hood of Fusion and powered by Apache Solr that we like so much. I think that concludes my part, and that allows us to land more or less in timing.
Great, thanks, Ronnie. Appreciate you going through some of that. So, Klaus, I don't know if you're on, we have any questions at all, but some really great information.
I'll just let Daniela check to see if there are any Q&A questions asked during the seminar. But while she does that, Simon, maybe I might just begin with you. You mentioned virtual assistants earlier in the conversation. Could you elaborate a little bit on how this has helped some of your customers?
Sure. So we have a virtual assistant technology that's based on Lucidworks Fusion, which is our search platform. And obviously that's all powered by Solr, as Ronnie was mentioning. But what's made that virtual assistant technology very interesting, which is called Smart Answers, is the fact that we can go and deliver that in parallel to a lot of the challenges that people are facing today in information dissemination. So whether it's a marketing organization trying to improve the curation of people navigating data on their website, or it's a knowledge worker or a CIO trying to distribute knowledge internally or externally more efficiently, or it's a call center looking to deflect some of their call volume. That's what the virtual assistant technology does. It helps in that, and it runs almost in parallel and directs through intelligent machine learning the individual to the right type of information asset or an answer. So a good example of a particular customer actually thinking about this that really has done this to a great extent with all of their support centers is Reddit. Reddit is a big customer of Lucidworks, massive amounts of data in their call center environment, incidents, as well as knowledge base. But when they implemented Fusion, they did three things really, which was significant to their organization. They reduced their infrastructure by 200%. They reduced their cost base for the way that they were operating their knowledge and search solutions by 90%, which was incredible. But most importantly, they deflected their call volume by about 34%. And what does that mean? That means individuals were able, through virtual assistant and search technology, to find answers to questions in a way that meant that they didn't have to pick up the phone. They were delivering information to those resources within a few clicks, a few Q&As through an intelligent virtual assistant. This isn't one that was dumb. It's fairly just only responding with static responses. This is something that intelligently was responding and to deliver those right results. So with that in mind, obviously, that was a key part of the solution. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it does. And maybe one follow-up question. You mentioned that Reddit uses the search to help get information from such a very big website. Does that mean that Lucid is really built for the cloud platforms such as Reddit?
But yes, they actually were on on-premise solution, but
Okay.
Fusion itself as a platform works on-premise. It works in a cloud like Amazon GCP. It's fully containerized, and it works in a hybrid model as well. We have various different managed solution options, whether people want us to manage it on-premise or and that we can do that, and our partners do that as well, or people want to run it as a platform as a service. We operate that as well. So that's the value of the virtual assistant actually, because we can run smart answers in a cloud in parallel. It's been a very quick and easy way for organizations to provide a solution to their employees and also ultimately their customers, to go and get them to sort of ask questions like, can you tell me where the information is related to this particular customer? And it goes and curates the responses and delivers the responses back. It's things like that, and we've actually done speech-to-text solutions in all those areas as well. But you're right, it can operate in any environment, and the platforms are agnostic when it comes to that.
Okay, thank you for that answer. And I think I have one here, external question. This one is for Ronnie. You mentioned earlier in your discussion earlier about data volume. Is Lucid Search easy to scale on systems like Alfresco with multi-million document stores?
Well, yeah, the first answer is, of course, it's at the basis, there is the technology of Solr to scale it. And that means technologies and techniques like sharding of your index and clustering it is the way to go. And we're actually testing that because moving beyond 100 million documents and you want to use your Solr indexes is important. We've seen some differences in the design in how Fusion actually uses Solr and how, for instance, the tracking in Alfresco happens. But yes, we have tests with 100 million documents in either Solr or Fusion, where we can scale the searches. So what we want to achieve, and there's some fine tuning to be done, is that even with 100 million documents, you can build a Solr cluster beneath Fusion that would return 95% of your queries in 3 seconds, where we put our benchmark. It involves a number of techniques, of course, to optimize the Solr cluster. But at that order of magnitude, we have engineered this, and we know about it. Of course, we always look one order of magnitude up. If you look at a billion documents, that's a different story. But at 100 million documents, it's possible to scale Solr to retrieve the queries within 3 seconds.
Okay. It seems like you're also in the testing phase with Solr at the moment. Have you tested any of the AI or machine learning capabilities of Fusion on your content?
Yeah. I can say we did tests on integrating and pilots on integrating OpenNLP into Fusion, because one of the added values is the ease at which you can integrate machine learning into it. And we did quite a bit of work to perform the identification of personal information in documents. And that is, of course, first of all, names, family names, and first names, which is a more complex problem than one would think in different languages. So we trained an OpenNLP model and integrated that into Fusion. Actually, it's something that we can demonstrate how that works.
Okay, excellent. I am just checking the Q&A forum here, and I have no other questions at the moment. So I want to thank both of you gentlemen for giving us this wonderful presentation today. And I think we'll now close. It's right at the hour. So thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.